In this episode, I take you to Bellefontaine Cemetery in St. Louis. So, sit tight and get ready to learn. Hello, I'm Jason. Welcome to another episode of Historically Marked. This is the first in one of many series I plan on doing called Cemeteries with Markers. And what better way to start than do it here in arguably St. Louis's most historic cemetery, which is Bellefontaine. Now, speaking of which, let me just get this out of the way. Now, I've heard it pronounced many different ways. Bellefontaine, Bellefontaine, I don't know. But you'll hear me say it many different ways in this video, so kind of bear with me on that one. But it is one of the most historic cemeteries in North St. Louis, all over the city, because it was actually the first of such thing here in the city. Because, now let me give you a little history here. Back in the late 1840s, you know, even before going back to the city's founding, a lot of people were buried outside their churches, their residences, and in some rural areas. Well, at the time, this spot where I'm standing on was once considered rural in the mid-19th century. And so there was a cholera epidemic, and they wanted to put some of the victims, you know, here. And, you know, there's a lot more detail into that. But this was intentional to put it, you know, on the outskirts of the city, you know, away from downtown. And a lot of cities seem to have followed on that. There are over 87,000 people buried in this cemetery. I don't really know how much is marked, but I'm sure there's maybe a small percentage of that. And according to the website findagrave.com, which is one of my favorite historical websites, there is at least 300 famous interments here. Politicians, inventors, authors, entertainers. And in this video, I will show you plenty notable graves. And one other thing to note is, this is a non-religious affiliated cemetery, so anybody of any faith or lack of faith can be buried here. Unlike, say, Calvary Cemetery, which is next door. I will have an episode on that pretty soon. But as far as like political divides, there are both Union and Confederate soldiers buried here. So that is very interesting to note. And I understand cemeteries are not for everyone, but if history and cemeteries are your thing, then definitely come with me and I will show you a little tour of Bellefontaine Cemetery. Here we go. They do have self-guided tour maps for anyone who is interested. And there is a road, you know, that takes you all around the cemetery, and it is marked with a white line. And you'll see plenty of red markers, which I will show you. A lot of the special interments are marked with one of these with a red marker. This one happens to be the first one. Some of the Civil War ones, on the other hand, are marked with a black marker. This is the Lambert family, not to be confused with the Throat Rolls fame, but this is Albert Bond Lambert's family. Lambert was an athlete. He competed in both the 1900 Summer Olympics as well as the 1904 Summer Olympics, which were held in St. Louis, well, the latter was. And he was also the son of the founder of Listerine, you know, the mouthwash stuff we use, and he was an aviator. So later in life, he funded the flight for Charles Lindbergh, which was very world famous in the 1920s. And now we are approaching the gravesite of the Queeny family. And in case you don't know who the Queenys are, no, it is not the name of a dog. But this is John F. Queeny's family. And John F. Queeny, John Francis Queeny, was the founder of Monsanto, which is one of the most controversial companies in America. It is based here in St. Louis. This is a special grave site for Herman C.G. Luyties. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. But who was Herman Luyties, you ask? Well, I didn't know until I came here, but He was the owner of the first proprietary drugstore in St. Louis. And as far as this angel statue, this was commissioned, and it was pretty much the version of the Monteverde angel in Italy, behind glass. As we approach the grave sites of the McDonnell family, I'd like to point out there is a marker about the state champion tree, which held that position from 2010 to 2017. This is the American elm tree. And here is a historical marker, even though it's pretty much about horticulture, but still. And now we get to the McDonnell family. James S. McDonnell Jr. is the co-founder of McDonnell Douglas, which, as most of us know, became Boeing later on. But as a lot of us know, James S. McDonnell Jr., his legacy is in being a pioneer in aviation as well as engineering. A lot of places hold his name, including James S. McDonnell Boulevard, which is by Lambert Field. The planetarium, which is now part of the St. Louis Science Center, bears his name, which is, of course, is in Forest Park. There's also a James McDonnell Park here in St. Louis. Many others. There's also a building at Washington University. So yes, this man left behind a great legacy, and I'm glad people are following in his footsteps as far as his vision in aviation. And now for us Cardinal fans, well, like myself, I understand a lot of my viewers probably aren't, but this is the gravesite of Chris Vander, who was one of the original owners. This was back in 1882 when they were known as the St. Louis Brown Stockings in the National League. So here's a story of Chris Vander's background. He immigrated from Germany, opened up a grocery store here in St. Louis after quickly spending some time in New York City. And then that grocery store became a saloon. And then he wondered, well, how is he making money? He really wasn't making much money except for people who were coming back from baseball games. So he thought his ticket to some cash flow was purchasing the 1882 St. Louis Browns for only $1,800, of course, back then. And even though he didn't really know very much about baseball at the time of his purchase, he stayed very involved with the team, knowing little by little about the whole sports business. He even hired future Chicago White Sox owner Charles Comiskey to play first base and eventually manage the team. Now the statue, I don't know if you can see it because of the sunlight, but yes, he had that statue made of himself while he was alive, and this was actually placed outside Sportsman's Park in St. Louis, which of course where the Brown Stockings played, but fittingly it is now on his monument. There is still a lot of history beyond the early years of the St. Louis Cardinals franchise. Like in 1892, Vander went bankrupt, but so he decided to expand the stadium, which he owned, and made it into like an amusement park, and he even called it the Coney Island of the West. In 1898, he was forced to sell the team after many scandals and such, but in 1899, the baseball team became the Perfectos for only that year, and of course, as we all know, by 1900, they were known as the St. Louis Cardinals. Rest in peace indeed. And another tidbit about Chris Vander, apparently, according to his Wikipedia page, the term fan, which we all know is short for fanatic, was attributed to him. Ain't that something? This is the grave site of Robert Barnes and his wife. And in big letters on his monument, founder of Barnes Hospital. This gravesite right here is the grave of Elizabeth W. Robert. Well, she later became Elizabeth McMillan, as it says on the stone. but she was a Titanic survivor whose story was the first-hand account of the tragedy, and it was published by the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And now we are here at the Wainwright Mausoleum, where the final resting place of Ellis Wainwright is. Now, even though the Bellefontaine Cemetery is in the National Register of Historic Places, this actual mausoleum itself was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1970, so it's kind of odd that, you know, NRHP inside an NRHP. The person who designed this tomb was Louis Sullivan, who was a renowned architect at the time. Now keep in mind, now during the 19th centuries, architects were like the rock stars of their time. Whoever came up with the coolest design got all the attention. And right across from Wainwright is the Lambert family. I plan to do an episode in the future on the Lambert mansion. The Lambert family, as most St. Louisans know about their troubled history, they were once a brewing empire during the late 19th century, competing with Anheuser-Busch. So I'm going to go kind of closer to the door. I know obviously I can't go in there, but it's kind of worth getting close to, if you know what I mean. Going towards the northwest part of the cemetery, this is a chapel that was named after the first superintendent of the cemetery. It was named after Almarin Hotchkiss. Hotchkiss Chapel, here we go. And this is just a plaque commemorating that. And obviously funeral services are conducted in this place, as well as weddings. That's right. I don't know, I mean, of course I'm no expert on weddings, nor do I probably have any room to criticize, but it'd be kind of weird, you know, having your whole wedding party and all of your guests going to this whole cemetery, you know. But the chapel is kind of small, and, you know, some people prefer modest weddings, and that's fine. And to the left of the chapel, you can actually get a really nice view of the industrial part of St. Louis. There's like a big stack of, it's not dirt, but it looks more kind of like metals of some sort. It's always easy to forget that we're on top of a hill. This is the final resting place of Anne C.T. Farrar, who was William Clark's niece. And don't worry, we will see Clark's grave on this tour in this video. And this is kind of like a Greek revival. Oop, be very careful. You can tell times have kind of been hard on this. Pretty unique for what it is. And here it even says, I didn't realize there was more than one person. It looks like there's 40 people buried below here. Wow. Crazy as it is. And one of the most visited tombs here in this cemetery belongs to one of the patriarchs of one of the most famous beer empires, not just here in St. Louis, but all over the world. The Adolphus Busch tomb. Of course I can't go in, you can see it's locked, but you can kind of get a view of how magnificent it looks behind the glass. From what I hear though, they do have brewery tours here at the cemetery, and I think they actually let people go in this place, but I could be wrong. Somebody may have to clarify that for me. And not too far from the Busch Mausoleum is this grave of Susan Blow. Sure, you probably don't know who she is, but chances are you've likely attended kindergarten. Well, if it wasn't for this lady right here, you probably would not have attended kindergarten. She is the founder of the first kindergarten, which was here in St. Louis. South Side, but still, St. Louis. And next to her is Henry T. Blow, her father. And now I'm approaching the lot for the O'Fallon family. This is the family of John O'Fallon. The towns, or should I say cities, of O'Fallon, Illinois and Missouri were both named after him. He was also the nephew of William Clark. And, you know, throughout his life, he was a banker, he was a tycoon. Goes without saying, he was St. Louisans, one of their most richest men. He's got a big family. A lot of them are buried here. You can just kind of tell, you know, just kind of looking around and giving a little pan shot here. So not many people know this, but the pedestal figure that is on top of this, which I'm pointing to right now, is called Hope. And the direction she is facing is towards the Mississippi River. So yeah, so in other words, the Mississippi River is that way. Okay. Still, very cool, very unique and cool obelisk. And this here is the Link family. This is one of the most famous local architects, Theodore Link. He designed St. Louis Union Station, as well as Monsanto Seminary in Godfrey, Illinois, which is now Lewis and Clark Community College. In addition, he was also one of the main architects of the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. Here's the gravesite of John Barry Meacham, who was a pastor, and he was the first pastor of the First Baptist Church west of the Mississippi River. His wife was Mary Meacham, who, of course, was part of the Mary Meacham Freedom Crossing. Now, she is not technically buried here. Nobody really knows for sure where her human remains are, but her memorial is here in Bellefontaine Cemetery. And just a short walk from those is the grave site of John Mason Peck. He was the founder of Shirtlift College, which is now SIUE Dental School in Alton. There is even a historical marker dedicated to him across from the school, which is not too far from the Robert Wadlow statue. And in front of me is the William Clark Monument. This is the final resting place of the explorer. Obviously, the Clark and Lewis and Clark fame. And while no person buried in the cemetery is better than others by any means, this one definitely comes with a lot of inscription. This, of course, is a bust of his with a Masonic symbol on top. And then you just kind of walk around. Talks about his journey. A passage from Deuteronomy. And some, yeah, I guess this is a gargoyle. Something Gothic of anything. And before I leave this area, this is also kind of a marking which was put here during the bicentennial of their famous voyage in 2004. Hopefully you can see it. This is a quote of communicating with his friend Thomas Jefferson. Hopefully you know who he is. And there is some more inscription on the back of this. So I hope you enjoyed this tour of many of the famous, notable people who are buried here in this cemetery. The cemetery has quite a lot of history. Maybe you may be buried in here, who knows? But the cemetery is open to anyone. It is in North St. Louis, and it is very highly secured. There's at least 1 or 2 security cars here. And of course, when I was here, there was one. But Anywho, this is the first in many of my cemeteries with markers series, so I hope you tune in for the future. I understand cemeteries are not for everyone. For me, they are many things. They're kind of relaxing, sometimes depressing, sometimes a learning experience, and a lot of times, you know, very calm and peaceful. So hope you again, I hope you enjoyed this. So this is Jason. I'm signing off. This is Historically Marked.